You're listening to the Self-Disruption Show on iHeartRadio with Audrey Lawrence. Hacking business, science, and psychology to smash your goals.
This is Audrey Lawrence, and you're listening to WWPR or wherever you get your podcasts on iHeartRadio. The Self-Disruption Show, how we hack science, psychology, and neuroscience to get us closer to our goals. Well, folks, today I have the leader of all leaders, the man on the field, the man in the boardroom, the man teaching the people who need to be growing. His name is Tony Faulkner, and he's coming to us all the way from the UK. He is an executive coach. He's worked with professional footy teams. I can't wait to introduce to you, Tony. Hey, Tony, welcome to the show.
Hey, Audrey, how are you doing?
So good. I know that it's a little bit of a time difference. Tell us where you're calling from.
I'm Manchester, England, and what time are we on? We're at 7 o'clock in the evening, but for a change, it's a nice day. The sun's out, so I can't complain.
Wonderful. You know, I love your work. You know, I obsess about what leadership looks like, and you have this amazing sweet spot where you marry the brilliance of neuroscience and what it is to see the psychological perspectives of what success looks like into sports. I mean, what a cool job. People must say that you have like the dream job of all dream jobs. How did you get into this space of like neuroscience and football?
Well, I was a footballer myself many years ago. Had to retire early with a back injury and I originally became a physiotherapist. And I got to admit, I hated it. I didn't want to be rubbing footballers' legs all my life. But what it did was it created a curiosity in me with regards to how these athletes thought and why they behaved in the way they did every day. And I had a very intimate relationship with them because I was physically working with them day to day. So during my role as a physical therapist, I went back to university and I trained in psychology. And then later on, I then trained in neuroscience. And I made the move then from a physical therapist, as it's called over in the US, to a performance director across a number of sports organizations. So my role was to ultimately oversee all aspects of performance in the individual players, but then that also then moved into aspects of performance with our staff, because ultimately the staff create the environment we operate in, and then all the way through to the senior management teams and executive teams within some of these organizations. So a great insight into human behavior.
Wow. So you clearly believe that there's a correlation to how we succeed on the field and that the real game is played in our mind, that first we must succeed in our head before we can win on the court or win in the field. How close is the relationship of winning? Is it different in sports than it is in the boardroom, or is there mentalities that you feel are connected?
I think there are many similarities, whilst at the same time, the context and the content is very different. But one thing is the same across the board, and that's people. People are athletes, and people sit in the boardroom. That is the common denominator. And what drives a lot of performance in an athletic environment, which is very similar to what drives performance in an executive environment, is the key characteristics of human excellence, which are such things like emotional regulation, such things like confidence, such things like self-worth, and so on and so forth, and resilience, dealing with the multiple challenges that we're going to get thrown at us day in, day out. And many analogies that are seen in the sporting arena can be taken into that boardroom and vice versa, in order to see it from a slightly different scenario situation, but to link the two together and see how those human characteristics cross boundaries in order for you to be better, but critically in order for you to see how you can grow and transfer what you've done in one career into another career.
Absolutely. You reframed it for me. I do a lot of work in the culture space, but when you think about it, culture is just a version of team building. So if you're building a team on the field, or if you're building a team inside an organization, those same aspects of what it is to create what I call unsiloed walls, where we truly learn to depend on each other, being independent of our own character, yet supporting each other. So this sounds like a broader application. Do you feel that there's a sports mentality that needs to sort of take over into some of the shortfalls of, we'll say, classic old-fashioned business? So we see a lot of dinosaurs in business, those non-agile guys fallen over. Is it time for them to sort of broaden their skill set, Tony, and start sort of borrowing from the field?
But it's a real interesting and topical point, that particularly over here in the UK. One of the programs that we actually deliver is what's called the executive athlete. So when we work with executive teams in organizations, and we look at what we call the optimal state for performance, and within that, we draw the analogy between an elite level athlete and an elite level executive. And interestingly, an elite level athlete will train for round about 70% of their career, and will then only compete for about 30% of their career. And that obviously differs across different sports. I mean, if you look at the Olympics, for example, you know, the amount of training they do over a 4-year period for maybe a 10-second piece of work is incredible. If you then go and look at an executive, they may have, you know, a 30-40-year career, but 80% of their time is taken up of competing, and only 20% is taken up of training. So if you flip that on the head and you say, well, okay, from an executive perspective, whilst we've harbored all this knowledge, all these great experiences, along the way we've developed a skill set which hopefully is extremely refined, which enables me to compete and operate at this level. There's also an aspect that they can add into who they are and what they do with regards to increasing their training, increasing their level of education to optimize their performance when they're in those real situations. So that dichotomy of an athlete's career and all the training and little competing compared to an executive is an interesting angle to look at with regards to who I am, where I want to get to, and potentially what I need to do in order to grow and give myself those opportunities to improve my performance.
Yeah, it sounds like a paradigm shift in sort of what you believe your coaching ability is. So if you've spent your majority of your career in the C-suite, and I'm talking to you, my listeners, because I know who you are, have you invested in what it is to amp up that 20% and start moving that ratio to really be competitive on the field, whatever your field is? Are you really taking onus of what it is to be coachable? It's one thing to coach and lead, and that's what we see among our leaders, but also we have to be sort of permeable enough to be able to be coachable. And how are you challenging yourself as a leader to say that I'm stretching myself, I'm trying new things, I'm listening to new methodologies, I'm agile enough? Well, Tony, your stuff sounds like a really great fit for this. How can we learn more about you and what you do and where we can see more of what your work is? Because I think that there's going to be a big groundswell. Knowing what I know about you and your history, one smart cookie, how do we learn how we can advance ourselves through your sports mentality?
We have a great saying which we like anyway, which says, I'll go back a step. I came over to West Point many years ago now. It might have been when we developed the relationship with Carol Dweck at Stanford, but they had a great sign which said it takes balls to rest. And what they mean by that is that there comes a time, whoever you are, wherever you do, when you actually need to take a step back, to look at who you are and what you've achieved, and decide, okay, regardless of all my successes now, I can continue to learn and grow. Just because I sit in this high level position, I don't have all the answers. And I need, on occasions, to show a level of vulnerability to myself, maybe not to my team, but to myself, in order to then recalibrate, to re-stimulate, and to go again. And another saying we have says, which is professionals have coaches, amateurs don't. And if you think of that from the sporting perspective, all the top NFL players, the NBA players, the Premier League footballers over in the UK, throughout their career, they work with a coach. The very many of your chief executives in organizations over the world, when they are appointed into those very senior roles, many of them straight away are given a coach of some description to work with. And in some of the biggest organizations around the world, it's mandatory. And in some of the biggest organizations over the world, it's also it's not a case of we would like you to work with this individual. It's a case of you will work with this individual, and any bonuses or any performance reviews are linked into how you work with this individual, because you're now sat in that chair. It's a lonely position, or it can be a lonely position. You need to continue to grow. Professionals have coaches. So I think that that awareness, when you get into those executive level roles, that you possibly will be lonely, you need to be vulnerable to yourself, then starts to point you in the direction of, well, okay, how do I go about providing that? We call it an inch square. And if you just bear with me for a minute, I'll explain it. We have what we call an inch square, and then we have 4 spheres around it. And in one sphere, we have what's called a co-creator. Who do you go to in your industry who is a co-creator that you can sit down with, and they can offer high support and high challenge? The other sphere is then what we call a provocateur, or someone that plays devil's advocate. Who can you go to when you're not quite sure with regards to what to do next, that is going to be the individual that's going to offer you that level of challenge? The other area is a realist, the voice of common sense. Who is the individual that you go to when you need that wisdom, that someone has walked in your shoes prior to you? And then the other sphere is what we call a naive expert. So you've got those 4 spheres, and we call it your inch square. And the naive expert is an interesting perspective. Over here in the UK, we've got what's called GB Cycling. And GB Cycling are one of the most successful sports teams on the planet over the past 20 years. When they enter World Championships and Olympics, they have won more medals than the vast majority of anyone else per capita for the funding that they receive. Wow. And very interestingly, they used to have a member of their board who was a naive expert, and he was actually known as the director of ignorance. And he was brought in for that reason. He could ask a question which was completely irrelevant to the industry of cycling because he wasn't from there. So he could cut through the egos, he could cut through the barriers, and he was able to ask that question that someone who was potentially in situ, in role for many, many years wouldn't ask, or wouldn't see the point in asking, because they're very institutionalized. So that inch square is something that we work with a lot of our executives to get that support and challenge.
Yeah. Tony, I always feel like when a methodology you see reoccurring again and again with a different name on it, there's got to be something in it. I call this the board of directors, and Clayton Christensen calls it the various voices. And it's who are you attracting in your league of mentors and coaches that fill each of these different roles that can challenge us to think completely different. You know, folks, we do ourselves a disservice when we decide to align with everyone in our LinkedIn group, because the search engine has served us exactly who the same people are. And we do ourselves a disservice when we only associate with whoever Facebook serves up to us. That real winners, when we study the neuroscience of winners, they expose themselves to tremendous amounts of various voices, different mentalities and mindsets that challenge us. And this inch square is a brilliant version of it. So, you know, the big question to me is, how am I proof of concept, my naive expert, or finding that devil's advocate? When you start creating criteria when from our board of director perspective, that people fit into this onus of this category, and we understand how they improve our lives, and then we start creating a fruitful relationship to add them to our board of directors. And I write about that and how to attract these people into our lives. That's a whole other conversation about making yourself investable, that people choose to invest in you to be part of this and to be on your board of directors, and how you forge those relationships. But the inch square, Tony, is just fabulous. I love, of all of them, the one that I think is most beautiful is the naive expert. I just think that is the hardest and the easiest person to find. It's somebody who is genuinely intelligent, but completely naive about your space. And if we think about that in our own lives, we all know people that could fit into that. It's the willingness to reach out, to ask someone to be on our board of directors, employ to them and commit to what your goal is, dissect it out and claim it, and then have them circle around with them and have them be part of the conversation with you that is a conversation of growth. And we know that our listeners do that. I mean, you are the boss in this universe. This is so great. How can I find out more about you, Tony? Don't forget, I want to know your website. I want to know if you want listeners to reach out to you, because this is what we want more of.
Yeah, well, we the website is www.vsiee.com. You can learn about the executive education programs that we run for chief executives in sport and industry, and also our sporting directors programs that we run in the world of sport globally. We are hoping to land in America in the not too distant future, when we'll be running those programs out of the US. So we've got some really exciting developments, which we should be able to announce within the next 4 to 6 weeks. We're active on LinkedIn, and that just comes under my name, Tony Faulkner, Managing Director for VSI, and also on Twitter, which is at VSI Exec Ed. And you can learn about the programs that we deliver, the executives from across the world of business and sport that join the programs, the activities that we get up to over in the UK within the world of sport and the world of business. So love to speak to anyone that's got any interest in this area. From our perspective, we're always learning, we're always challenging what we know and what we do. And considering that the world we've lived in for the last 2 years, we're hopefully getting back to being able to travel again to different regions of the world and deliver these programs.
I love it. We will post all of your information to our audience on our website and on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure that the listeners who reach out with any questions will forward them. Tony, thanks so much for being here with us. Tell me that when you've got things going on in the States, that you'll come back on the show and share it with my audience all over the States. This is going to be something that people are going to want to learn more about. No pressure there.
No, Audrey, we'd love to do that. So I'll hold you to that. I'll be back in touch with you in a month to 6 weeks' time, and hopefully we can share the news with you.
Well, I'm so thrilled with my guest today, Tony Faulkner. This is Audrey Lawrence, and you're listening to the Self-Disruption Show, where we hack science, psychology, and neuroscience to get us closer to your goals. Be sure to follow us on all your social media outlets.
Thank you for listening to the Self-Disruption Show with Audrey Lawrence. To learn more, go to audreylawrence.org and follow us on your favorite social media. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Grab your free downloadable gift at audreylawrence.org/gift.